Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Hello, it's Dr. Gemma. Welcome back to the Cognitive Podcast. We're here at episode 22, and I'm so grateful to have you along with me today. Comments are always welcome. You can comment on the blog at Cognitive Podcast. Now, you all know cognitive is spelled C-O-G, the word knit, and then I-V-E, right? Just saying. cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com. You can also go to our group on Ravelry. I say that between gritted teeth because I just hate the new design. I can see why they're doing some of what they're doing, but I can't say I'm fond of it. However, it's still usable for me. It's just not as aesthetically pleasing as it was with the green. But you can go to our group there, Cognitive, and join in, introduce yourself, say good things in the different episode threads. I'd love to have you there. You can add yourself to the Cognitive Listeners Map. All of these links, by the way, that I'm talking about, there are always links for everything. They're in the show notes at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com and in our group on Ravelry. I think I just said that. I'm saying it again because you should realize things like the link to the listeners map, that's in the show notes. Including a link, by the way, to my YouTube channel, very originally and creatively named Dr. Gemma, 2 words spelled out. The YouTube channel, I haven't updated it in about a year now, but it's got 1-minute flash tips around surviving the pandemic and longer discussions of the kinds of strategies I most often use in my clinical work. I'm beginning to have fantasies about putting up strategies around dialectical behavioral therapy. We'll see how that goes. Please do be aware that I am still working. I have worked continuously. What a surprise. I'm a psychologist in a pandemic throughout the stay-at-home period. So I'm doing quite well. And I'm okay. Somebody was expressing that privately, like, are you guys okay? Yes, I'm just stressed because let's face it, I'm a psychologist in a pandemic. One of the sort of amazing things about that is I don't know how to get through a pandemic any more than you do, but I'm a psychotherapist. I have to think and act like I do. And of course, the reality of cognitive behavioral psychology is you sort of fake it till you make it, but it turns out I do. And that's why I do dialectical behavioral therapy, because it's really, really been helpful to me in getting through this time. But more of that in I'll Shoot. Meanwhile, there will not be a cognitive fiber retreat as far as I know in 2021. You never know if that'll change. I mean, I'm really waiting to see what happens with the vaccines. I am very pro-vaccine, so let me tell you right now, you're not coming if you don't have the shots. But otherwise, I don't know. I'd love to have one, even if it was 10 of us getting together to knit in a nice little hotel retreat for a weekend. Please stop trying to add yourself to my Instagram account because I'm getting robo accounts with porn accounts. Every time I post under Joe Biden's Instagram account, I get 10 porno accounts the next day. I think some of the Trumpsters aren't losing well. I'm just saying. In the warm thanks department, thank you, K&B Purple, for the very astute comment about the sensory rescue kit. That is, a few episodes back, I talked about the S in accepts, which is about sensory, that when you are trapped in your head and you need distraction, use your senses to come back in your body. And I mentioned that I have a sensory rescue kit that I take along with me. And K&B Purple very sensibly said, hey, could you put that list in the show notes? So it's now in the show notes for this episode, episode 22. If I get clever, I'll go back and also reprint this in that episode. You know, now that I think of it, that's a really good idea. Thank you, K&B Purple. That was a great idea. What, you may be wondering at this point, is on my hooks and needles. Well, I have finished Dead Zero this week because I have not been focused on knitting because the weather has gotten beautiful here. More on that in Shoot. But in progress, the Spectrum socks. These poor things are so hung up. I'm on sock number 1. And I'm past the heel and that's it. I'm stalled on the foot because I'm just not giving it love because, as you've heard before, I'm working on Twin Faces vest. Now, I am almost finished at last the second skein of that yarn, which makes me happy because I'm going to measure it and then send it to her. And I'm also going to measure, I know she wears turtlenecks from the same company I do. So I'm actually just going to measure that side seam as a kind of guide. Now the armpit of a turtleneck is up closer, the fabric armpit is up closer to my physical armpit than the armhole, the bottom of an armhole of a vest would be. But it's as good a guess as any because I can make this too long and Twin Face will be fine. It's if I make it too short, we have a problem. But I'm on the second skein of that vest and I'm almost there. It's probably about 12 inches long right now. And that's wherever I finish is where I stop and put in the rescue line and then send it off to her. In the meantime, the wild lettuce shawl got no love for like a week. And so I've been adding to it. Now I'm at the point where I finished the body of the shawl and you turn the shawl sideways with all the bottom stitches on the long edge of the vest still live on your needle, on the cable of your long needle, and then you take a second needle and you knit sideways at 90 degrees to the original. So it's a 12-row repeat and you connect it at every, gotta stop and think this through, every odd number row. The last row of the knitted on lace, you do a knit 2 together with one of the live stitches at the edge of the shawl. So you knit your way across the bottom of the shawl, adding this beautiful lace fringe. I have to tell you, the wild lettuce, I'm not quite sure I can see the logic of the lace pattern in the body. It's hard to, it's beautiful, but it's not as visibly clear to me as other lace patterns have been. However, I love, 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 love this knitted on edging to the point where I would seriously consider knitting just a very plain body of the shawl without the lace work and then just adding this to the edge if I got it up to the right number to make this work mathematically. I love this knitted on edging. It's just gorgeous. It's sort of like 2 arrows pointing down, repeated over and over. It looks really cool. So anyway, I got 2 more of those repeats on, but I'm nowhere near the midpoint. I've got a long way to go to the midpoint where you stop and do a little short row thing for a couple rows to give it a nice point at the midpoint. It's a triangular shawl. And then you go back to the pattern. So, you know, this thing's going to take me the rest of my human life, but I'm really loving this. And that knitted on edging is worth the price of admissions. If you don't feel like doing a fancy lace shawl, you just get your shawl out to 185 stitches, you mark the center stitch, and then you can add that knitted on lace edging. This is one of the joys of fickle knitters' work, that I've done this before. Because what Michelle does, Michelle Miller, the actual fickle knitter, she does these very short stretches of highly symmetrical lace, which I love. And because they are what they are, you can substitute other patterns in and out based on what you like. I can't say I've disliked many of her patterns. In fact, I love her patterns. But, you know, once or twice I've said, I don't want to start a shawl that way. I want to start it this way. Or I think it was on the Tehachapi Project shawl. The first 15 rows were just this sort of yarn over, knit one, yarn over, and I just didn't like it. And so I looked at the second section and worked it, sort of reverse engineered it. And the beauty of Michelle's shawls is you can do that. I know there was another one of her shawls where I just said, all I want from that is the knitted on lace edging. So, you know, one Michelle Miller pattern can keep you going for a lifetime is what I'm telling you. You can switch things in and out based on your own taste. It's always worth making her shawls exactly the way she tells you how the first time. You want to see what you get before you start messing with it. It's kind of like cooking. You know, when I make a new recipe, The first time I follow the recipe as exactly as I can because I want to find out, what does the creator think I'm supposed to come up with here? And if I like or don't like it, or if I have other preferences, then I start switching things in and out. And I kind of feel that way about Michelle's shawls, that they're so wonderful and there's so many insanely good lace patterns in her shawls to choose from. So you can mix and match, but do give it a dry run in its original form. So anyway, that's the wild lettuce shawl. And I'll be finishing it in about, 2025. But I say that as a joke, but when I think it took me 8 years to finish the Ohm shawl, this had nothing to do with Michelle, believe me. This was me screwing up. But I'm hoping to finish more rapidly. I love this shawl. I just love everything about it. Meanwhile, the temperature blanket, my one crochet project, is up to date. I'm so excited because today was supposed to go into the 80s. It did not where we are. But tomorrow is pretty definitely going into the 80s. New color. I'm slowly working my way into the yellows, out of the blues and blue-greens. And I'm excited because the 80s, you definitely go into a yellow-orange. And I've been in the 70s, which is a color called canary, which, as you can imagine, is a pretty straight-up yellow. So it is so much fun watching this thing grow and develop. And what else? Well, what am I wearing? Okay, I have had to abjure my knitted socks. Just too warm here. So I started wearing my cowls. And that's where I realized lace cowls in lace weight yarn have more of a purpose than I was remembering. So I'm going through my cowls and picking up, and my cowls and my shawls, I should say, like my one skein shawls. And this is the perfect time of year for those lace weight one skeins like Michelle Miller stuff. But I think in the picture I'm wearing a hitchhiker. This particular cowl that I'm wearing in the picture in the show notes is from my own hand spun. And I believe the fiber was Freckle Face Fibers, who no longer dyes. But anyway, go have a look at that. And I think it's in the hitchhiker pattern, and it came out fantastic. I'm looking at that and thinking, I can't believe I spun that. It's really good. I, like most spinners, with the exception of those of you out there making sweaters from your spun yarn, I find many spinners, spinsters, I should say properly, don't have a lot of confidence in their own yarn. That they make these beautiful yarns and they just stick them in a bin. And so I really like using my own yarn. I don't like spinning pounds and pounds to make a sweater so far. Although with the new Chero, now that I know there's this Chero breeder in town, that could change if I like what I get from this first braid that I got from her. But I think it's really important if you hand spin to learn to love your spinning and to learn to do things with it and to have confidence in it to work. Because we're all sort of brainwashed by these factory-made yarns into believing that yarn is always perfectly even and regular and routine. Now here I am knitting with some extremely old Cascade out of my stash because I try not to buy from Cascade because, number one, they used to be an American company and they still are, but they moved their production to Mexico. I'd really prefer to buy American where I can. However, here I am knitting in Cascade, which is the most factory-made of factory-made. And there's little puffs and pulls and unevennesses all over it, which I now see because I have the eyes of a spinster. So I think you have to learn to get comfortable and confident about the fact your spinning is good. But meanwhile, I realized, hey, there are days I just want to wear a turtleneck over leggings. And that's when it occurred to me, I have all these beautiful vests that I made myself years ago, back in the early 90s when I lived in Washington State. And vests were kind of a thing. A loose vest that you let hang open with very decorative buttons. It was a fad for like 2 years. And I love vests because I got a good simplicity pattern, which heaven knows if it still exists. But I got this great simplicity pattern and it took 1 yard of really nice fabric with an interesting pattern for the front. And then the back, it uses a synthetic glossy fabric. I forget what it is. So these things, they are not simple to make. I mean, you're making buttonholes and you're going around a fairly complicated outline with your sewing machine, but they're not hard to make. They just require a certain level of patience. So I have a whole bunch of these in my closet. And the thing that started me is the one I'm wearing in the pictures in the show notes. It was a fine whale corduroy with cats in rainbow colors. And each cat's body is rainbow colors. Like I'm looking at a cat that has a yellow head and orange neck and a red body underneath it. And all these cats are sitting together in a crowd. And if you look closely, some of them are wearing pearls. Some of them have bow ties. So this is absolutely the coolest fabric. They had it in 2 colors. One was in pinks and purples and reds. And they had enough of that I actually made a dress out of it. But they only had like 1.5 yards of the beautiful, bright Crayola Spectrum cats. So I bought it and I made it into a vest, and one of the best decisions I've ever made as a seamstress, let me tell you. So there I am in the vest, because in warm weather, these vests are excellent, and they look great. They even look great over the leggings, and you will notice I'm being photobombed by somebody else who wants to show off her back legs. So there we go. That's what I'm wearing. Dizzy Blondes, the electric eel wheel arrived, and I just haven't opened it yet. I'm probably saving it for my vacation, which starts a week from last night. And I'm so eager for my vacation. But I just haven't gotten the energy. Today was the beloved husband's birthday. So I didn't get to open the wheel, but I have no regrets about that. So there's a picture. It's going for $279. This is, of course, a 3D printed wheel with an engine that is not based on the normal mechanical parts, but is based on a computer motherboard. These things are brilliant. I have the Nano. Yes, I have 2 Nanos. I still haven't opened the newest Nano because I have not had Spinning Mojo for over a year. And I'm going to get down to that. The strategy. Well, we are still doing the skills for managing distress from dialectical behavioral therapy. And we are on the acronym IMPROVE, which stands for Improve the Moment, because the 2 acronyms for distress tolerance are based on 2 slightly different ideas. The first one, accepts, is to manage your distress. Accept that, a wise person accepts that she is distressed and manages it using that acronym. The second acronym, which we're now on, Improve, is about, okay, you're stuck. You can't simply distract yourself like you do with accepts. So Improve is about you're stuck in a situation like somebody is talking to you about something unpleasant, and you're going to improve the moment. And we are on the O. The O stands for one thing, as in focus on one thing, to the exclusion of all else. Those of you who are sharp just recognize the formula for meditation and for hypnosis, but we'll do those in other episodes. What we're talking about, your boss comes up to you and says, I don't like your latest piece of work. Focus on one thing. It's very easy to get distracted at a moment like that and say, oh my God, my boss hates me. Am I going to get written up? Is my job, blah, 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 blah. Don't do that. The boss told you what the boss thinks the boss is doing. I am correcting this piece of work that did not meet my standard. Focus on that. What do I need to do to correct? Because my job is to make the boss happy, and I don't need to take it personally. I can just focus on, okay. Now, for 1 minute here, I want you to be the boss, because I've been this boss, where you're explaining something to somebody. You come up to them and they say, look, I just read your notes on this case, and I want to talk to you about the way you're writing your notes because there's some lack of clarity, okay? Now, I know you're a good therapist, but I think we can make this a little better. We can tweak this a bit, and I think it'll make you even better. And I watch the person fall to pieces in front of me, and I'm thinking, what on earth are they hearing? I am saying I have faith in you. I know you're good at this. We need to do this little tweak. I am hired to train you, so this is a kind of reasonable thing for me to say. And I'm watching this therapist get defensive and crazy and nasty sometimes. Okay, that's where one thing just failed. When you're in an unpleasant moment, you need to focus on what is the situation we're trying to solve. And that's the one thing. You don't get personal. You don't get into your ego. You have to try and silence that and stay focused on just the one thing. What does the boss want? And let me tell you from experience on both sides, when you do it, things go much better. Like when you're just focused on, oh, okay, let me ask questions. Let me make sure I understand you. So this is what you want. This is what you want me to do. Okay, and your deadline is this. The boss just takes it better. Everything goes more smoothly, and you get a nice line in your annual review that says takes criticism well. But one thing at a time is really key too, because when you're distressed, your mind goes everywhere. And so putting blinders on your mind, slowing your imagination down and saying, what is the important thing in this moment is really, really helpful. So one fine day, my beloved son is he can just walk, so he's about 10 months old. And he's in the living room playing in some restraining thing, I don't know, like his little baby jumper or something. I walk in the kitchen, I look out the window because I see movement. My son's walking across the front yard. We live on a farm. Fortunately, he's heading towards a dirt road. I had no shoes on. That didn't stop me. Now, I could go crazy, like, oh my God, he's going to get hit by a car. This is going to be terrible. I'm naked, which I was. I was wearing a t-shirt and underwear. Or I can say, the important thing here is I got to get my kid back. We had to put a U-bolt lock 7 feet off the ground to stop him from doing this. He figured out how to get all the deadbolts open on the front door. My kid. Parents aren't stupid. Why I thought the kid would be. Anyway, so again, I remember at the bottom of my road I caught him because he was shod and I was not. And I picked him up and I'm walking up this dirt road barefoot for about 1/8 of a mile. Of course, one of the neighbors drives down. And I used my son to body block my midsection so they could see just above my knees. And I waved and I said, I got to stay focused on the job here is to get my kid home safely. I am not going to worry about what the neighbors think of me walking naked around with my baby. And that's one. Focus on one thing at a time. Keep your focus where it needs to be. Push away all those other thoughts because they're only slowing you down. All right, put a lid on it. To my great happiness this week, my son looked at me and said, Mom, you don't make pudding anymore. Now, here's what he meant, really. First, he meant, I want you to make pudding, which I agreed with. So I'll be doing that this weekend, I hope. Second, I make 2 types of pudding. One is chia seed pudding, which is from, I think, a Singapore recipe. I can't figure out where I got it from. Might have been from Two Sleevers, but I don't have one of the flavoring ingredients for it. So I'm sure it doesn't taste at all like Urvashi thinks it should taste. But I think of it fondly as slime pudding because chia seeds are really good for you. So it's a very vanilla, slimy pudding where you inhale a lot of chia seeds. This is not the pudding my son is thinking of. What my son wants is the no-bake cheesecake. And this is a recipe I got off some store-bought generic gelatin powder packets. And I love these things. Now, the no-bake cheesecake, you make a crust out of 2 cups of crushed walnuts. So you take walnut pieces already shelled, if you're lucky, from Trader Joe's, put them in a Ziploc, and then take a rolling pin and you add melted butter. I don't even say how much melted butter. That's interesting. You add the melted butter to put the crushed walnuts in the bag, mash them to pieces, and then you add enough melted butter to make it all hold together, and you put that in the bottom of a small spring-form cheesecake pan. Okay, that's your crust. But you don't have to eat this with a crust. I found from this kind of crust, I get kind of sick on that much walnut. So I started making it in little cups as pudding. And the recipe is in the show notes, but for those of you taking notes, it's 1 packet of powdered gelatin. That's usually a tablespoon. And then a 1/2 cup of Swerve or stevia, your sweetener of choice. Easy on the stevia because it'll get bitter if you put in too much. A cup of boiling water, a tablespoon of vanilla, 2 standard bricks, that's 16 ounces of cream cheese, which you want to soften. And if you're me and you want this to be chocolatey, and my son does, 1/2 a cup of a good cocoa powder. We like the Guittard red cocoa powder. And we'll use anything at this point. I also use Ghirardelli Dark for this. Okay, so this is really easy. You mix the gelatin and the Swerve in a small bowl, and then you add the boiling water to it, and you have to stir it for 5 minutes because you need the gelatin to really dissolve. Otherwise it clumps. If it clumps, don't worry, just keep making it. Meanwhile, you're going to take the cream cheese and the vanilla and the cocoa, if you want, in a big bowl. You can use a mixer, a hand mixer or a big KitchenAid mixer for that. And when you're ready, you're going to add the Swerve mix just a bit at a time until it's well blended. Then you put this in the fridge for 45 minutes. Now, if you're going to use cups and make it into pudding, you put it in individual cups at about the 30-minute mark. Because you put it in the fridge for 45 minutes and set timers. Every 15 minutes, you're going to stir it really well. And then At 45 minutes, you can pour it into the pan, into the walnut crust, and refrigerate it. Or you can just leave it in its little pudding cups in your fridge. So that is the no-bake cheesecake, or the cheesecake pudding, or the chocolate cheesecake pudding. Shoot. I'm still working on my 30 minutes per day. And I had a fantastic week. I have 4.2 miles. That's not true. I ran 4.5 miles this past week. And I did a 10-mile bike ride with my son from Ojai to the outskirts of Ventura. I had a terrific week. I rediscovered my running clothes. And that in itself is a discussion about trying to find a jog bra when you're my age, my dimensions, and my sag. But I did. And that's another story altogether. But I'm very happy about my week. However, we had the IBS episode. Now, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Lots of us have it. It's a joke in the running community. I was running a race and they put up all these signs along the track, along the route. And they're supposed to make us smile or think or ponder. And one of them says, no runner suffers constipation. Yeah. And if you're a runner and you're a distance runner, you've done some pretty exotic things to get to a restroom or to hide what you're doing in the bushes. If you have irritable bowel, I've had it since I was a teenager, and nobody's ever been able to treat it. And the best treatment was keto. That reducing carb and sugar is great for reducing irritable bowel. And irritable bowel has been a real experience in my life that I run out of restaurants, after meals, things like that. Keto stopped all that. However, I'm older, and the irritable bowel is either you get the trots or you get tied up. So now I'm into the tied up stage. It used to be I always got the trots. Exercise is great for that. Keto is great for that. However, then there is the situation where you're 1 mile into your run and all heck breaks loose, So I did have a day of that, and it made me sort of ponder what I know about this. The first thing is that runners get this fairly often, that I've never heard someone say, I gave up running because I have irritable bowel. And so when you're doing exercise, I talk all the time about route planning, that I'm very fond of talking about the Couch to 5K program. And in the original Couch to 5K, the guy who invented it, Hal Higdon, used to say, before you do that, you have to learn to walk 30 minutes for 30 days. And I've done that on several occasions. I'm not doing it currently, which is odd because I probably should have. Except I began to figure out this time that the 30 minutes for 30 days, as I've always said, is about learning what you need to know to exercise for 30 minutes. So walking 30 minutes for 30 days, if you're going to be a runner, is really important. If you're going to bike, maybe not so much, but doing something preparatory and low-key before you start helps you solve a lot of problems. Okay, and so I always talk about how if you're a runner, it teaches you what kind of equipment you need, where to find a good route, like what routes you think are good that are really not. You're walking and traffic is zipping by you and you think, I'll never be comfortable running on this. And so you have to pay attention in those 30 days. It'll teach you about gear. Like I'm walking and this bra isn't comfortable. It's certainly never going to work when I'm running. Okay, one of the things I have not talked about, though, is those 30 days teach you things like I have irritable bowel, and I wasn't thinking about that as a runner. And so I'm going to have to plan my routes. And bikers, this is you too. Probably swimmers, if you have it, you're going to have to really think about it in a slightly different way about how you exit the water, etc. But certainly if you run, if you bike, if you do anything of a distance, you're going to have to start contemplating that solution. And so I'd like to tell you, please don't let it stop you. But please recognize you're going to learn to do some pretty creative things if you're out on a long hike or if you're out on a long run, or in my case, even a short one. I was out for 1.5 miles and I got hit with the bug. Fortunately, I was running around the dirt roads around my house, so I just shifted my route so that I was pointed back at the house. And I'd say I just about made it in time. And my normal policy is when you're finished, clean up, reassemble yourself, and finish your run. So I did. So I'm now on week 2. But I would tell you that if you're letting this stop you, I'm really sorry But you might want to think about not letting it stop you, because exercise is really good for irritable bowel. It's one of the regulatory systems, because one of the things irritable bowel is about is the level of liquid in your colon. You have a hormone called antidiuretic hormone, and really, at least part of the irritable bowel system is that hormone is kind of out of whack. And exercise helps to regulate it. Movement of your lower body. So weightlifting, not so much, but swimming, walking, hiking, running, those are all good for it. Biking. Okay, so that's me on IBS and exercise and keto. The idea is, if you're managing IBS, you're going to look at balancing your running, and also you're balancing your exercise. And you might look at cutting back on your carbs, even if you're not going to go keto. But you also have to think about routes. And yes, every runner in this day and age knows where every Starbucks on her route lives. In the fluffy book department, I am reading Zen and the Art of Writing like the jewel that it is. I am savoring one chapter every few days, so I'm still reading that. But also, I'm listening to Jasper Ford's book, The Eyre Affair. That is Jane Eyre, E-Y-R-E. Jasper Ford's last name, he's Welsh, so it's spelled double F. F-F-O-R-D-E. So not Ford Automobile, but F-F-O-R-D-E. The Eyre Affair. If you know your English lit, The Eyre Affair is screamingly funny. It's in an alternate universe set in the 1980s, and they're in Britain, and everybody in Britain is incredibly well read. So it's all these literary references, and people are running around stealing literary manuscripts. And everywhere you go, there are people on street corners, the way they busk, instead of just playing music for you to throw coins, they recite famous poems. Oh my gosh, it's so great. It's just so great. The heroine is Thursday Next, and Ford has written many books about the amazing Next. I just can't even tell you, the word plays. Her boss is Victor Analogy. One of her best friends is Paige Turner. I mean, and he just does this completely calmly. And he has one of the best character names in all of literature. This really offensive man whose first name is Jack. And you can figure out what the last name is. I'm not going to ruin it. Literally, the first time I read that book, which was probably 15 years ago, I screamed with laughter when I got to Jack and said, okay, I don't care whatever goes on for the rest of this book. That name alone is going to make me read it. I cannot recommend Jasper Ford enough. He has the Nursery Crimes series as well, with characters out of nursery rhymes that are the heroes. This guy's mind is in a different reality than mine. It's so much fun. So I highly recommend anything by Jasper Ford, but a great starting point is The Eyre Affair. Something I really like. I've been a little down this week, mostly because I'm burned out and I need to get to my vacation next week. Did I mention that? And so I've been keeping myself going by planning the vacation. At least the first few days are going to be out at Big Bear in San Bernardino County, in the San Bernardino woods, in a lovely condo with my boys. And after that, I'm open to suggestion. But the name of the game is getting through this week without screaming, dying, or I don't know. And when I'm in that mood, there is a guy, Matt Harding, as in hard work, and then ing. Matt Harding. And Matt Harding did this amazing thing in the early 2000s. He traveled all over the world as a student, and he took videos of himself dancing with people all over the world. And he put them online and called it Where the Hell is Matt? A chewing gum company, I believe in Australia, picked him up and started paying him to do this. And he made some of the most amazing videos. Apparently he made one in 2020, but I'm not sure I've located it. Anyway, I put two of the YouTubes of Where the Hell is Matt. One is he's dancing to a song, I believe in Hindi, about prawn. And the second one is a song he wrote with his wife, I think, called Trip the Light. These are so beautiful. And when you feel like the universe is horrible and humans are filthy and disgusting animals, you need to watch the Where the Hell is Matt videos. I gave you the link to his, I believe it's his YouTube channel, but I also did direct YouTubes on the show notes. So you can just hit the YouTube and see him dance. I cannot say enough good things. This is a white guy. He is not dancing with like, oh, here's some white people and here's some white people. That's what makes this wonderful. He dances in Syria and the faces have to be blurred. I assume that's probably illegal to be filmed doing that, and he dances in Namibia with tribes people. He dances underwater with it looks like a whale. He dances with other scuba divers at one point. Well, they actually are kneeling on the bottom of the ocean, bubbling, but trying to dance. And as he does this, he gets better and better because in the beginning, in his very first videos, he just gets there and he bounces up and down and waves his hands. And with time, as he dances, you see him picking up dance moves from various people. It is so wonderful. At one point, he's dancing with Balinese dancers, and it's so beautiful watching. At one point, he's in Vienna doing ballroom, wearing a tux. It's just wonderful. Go watch the Where the Hell is Matt. Now I think he's changed it to Where the Heck, which makes me sad, but he's got small children. Okay. Blather. Well, someone said to me this week, I want to say it was DNA Price, but I don't think that's right. Someone said to me this week, so you actually decided you had COVID. And I thought, yeah, you've kind of missed my year coming in as you did at the beginning of this podcast revival in November. And I'm beginning to process it myself. I'm beginning to realize some of the stuff that happened to me. The pandemic, as a psychologist, was bad enough because I don't know how to live through a pandemic any more than you do. But I'm supposed to interpret the therapy I practice to you in a way that helps you live through a pandemic that I myself am experiencing for the first time. And it's been great. I've been proud to do it. I'm grateful to my boss, who's an excellent boss, because she trained us in dialectical behavioral therapy, which I'd already had some training in, but I really needed the update. And it was a great 2-day training that I did on my last vacation in September. And I'm already a CogB therapist, and I was already using a lot of these skills because I was trained by the inventor of DBT, Marsha Linehan, in 2009. I picked up CogB in 2000, I want to say about 2005 or 6, but I really didn't get how to practice it, and because I felt it was too remote until I trained with Marsha, and then I got it. I really got the value. And so when I got to this training last summer, it really helped. It really solidified a lot of what Marsha Linehan had taught us. However, back in late February of 2020, I went to Stitches West up in San Jose. And I had a patient who said he'd been to San Jose and people were wearing masks. And you have to remember, the pandemic is not declared, the quarantine is not declared till March 15th. So it's late February. I go to Stitches. I'm only there, I think, for like Sunday. I got there, I think, Saturday night, hung out with the Knitmores, bless them. And then Sunday we went, and I'm not a medical doctor by any degree, but my first master's is comparative physiology. I can read research quite well. And I was starting to read about the pandemic. And one of my patients said, well, if you go to San Jose, they're all masked. And I got up there, and no, they weren't. But it was Sunday afternoon. And the place was not as crowded as it would have been on Saturday. And I looked up one of the short aisles at the convention center. So it's like a half-sized aisle. And I was thinking about this flu that we thought of as the flu from China at the time. And thinking, this doesn't sound good. And I looked up the aisle and I just counted everybody who was over 60 on a cane or on a walker and got some astonishingly high number. And just started doing the math. Like if this represents a half aisle and there's this many full aisles and this many half aisles, how many people in this building would die of this new thing? And suddenly came up with this appalling number in the high hundreds and was scared to death and kept it to myself, but came home and bought N95s for my husband and my son, which was one of the best things I've ever done. And then, of course, I go home and I'm fine. Didn't get anything at Stitches. A few weeks later, it's early March, and I'm feeling bad. And I'm thinking, oh, did I get flu? But I had a flu shot. And I had this terrible thing in December. And it got to my lungs, but it didn't get bad. And I threw it off, and none of my patients got it. I was seeing patients, but I had an office that was a long room, like a long rectangle. And I made them stay at the far end of the room, and I sat at the far other end behind my desk, which I normally sit closer to the patient in a sort of conversation circle. And none of my patients got it. But then in January, almost all of them got it. And I didn't think much about it, except I thought it was odd because I'd had a flu shot, and I just assumed that this was some flu variant. Now the CDC says COVID was in the country at that point, but I'll never know. But then in early March, starts up again. Was it the same thing? If it was a lot worse. It got into my lungs, and it was really harsh in my lungs. I'd be pretty good all day, but I was incredibly tired. But at night, I had to sleep sitting up, and if I slid down, I'd wake up choking, literally gagging and gasping for air. And this was very bad. But, I was starting to watch the COVID information and said, I might have COVID, except I don't have a fever. And they said, well, if you have a fever, you need to go see your doctor. But there were no COVID tests. There was no way to prove you had it. Okay, so on Friday the 13th, I realized I am really sick. I was in my office, so I made a point of not letting the patients get within 6 feet of me, and I stayed at the far end of the office from them. And I realized at the end of the day, I can't do this. I might have COVID. And none of us were that serious about it, but I thought, well, on the off chance. So on Saturday the 14th, I did my first online sessions. I contacted everybody, said, you can see me on Zoom, Skype, or FaceTime, but we can't do this face-to-face because I'm sick. So I did that. It went pretty well. And then the next day, Sunday the 15th, I had a fever, and I woke up feeling feverish, and I was about 99, but then an hour later, I was about 103. And that's where I got scared. So I took a lot of aspirin and went to the urgent care. And the doctor didn't take me seriously either, except she was wondering why I had a better respirator than she did. And I liked her. I know this doctor anyway. I know her from the past. But when I said, well, here's the news with a fever, she sort of blanched behind her mask and said, oh, no, and took my fever again. And she said, what did you do about it? And I said, I took aspirin right away. And she literally said, oh, thank God. And she said, you need to keep doing that. And then she looked at me and she said, I can't tell you you have COVID. We don't have any tests. And she said, if I send you to the hospital, they don't have any tests. They're getting them soon, but they don't have them. And she said, if you have COVID, you're going to infect everybody there. Now, remember, this is before there was masking. So I'd be in a waiting room full of unmasked people. And she said, also, if you don't have COVID, you're vulnerable. And if somebody there has COVID, you're going to get it in this condition. So we agreed that the thing to do was treat every symptom. She sent me home with 6 prescriptions. I didn't get better until I saw Chris Cuomo on CNN talking about his COVID and talking about the pulmonary exercises developed by the head nurse at the Queen's Hospital of London Pulmonary Division. I watched those videos. I started doing the exercises hardcore every few minutes. That worked. Within 24 hours, I was improving. Okay. So I didn't think much about that, except at the end of April, it came back. It wasn't as bad. However, after the April bout, I was lightheaded every day, all the time. There was nothing I could do to make it stop. I even tried fasting, which was a bad idea, because one night, as I was ending my fast, literally I was going to eat the next day. And fasting, if you're a keto, it's a reset for your body, and I enjoy fasting. But I was fasting. I got up in the middle of the night because I needed to change the thermostat. Now, here's how I know I was goofy. I could have done that from bed. I have a program, an app on my laptop, my tablet, that's sitting right next to me on the side of the bed. But I get up, and I make it. I walk out into the hallway under the hardwood floor. I change the thermostat, and then the whole house tilted 90 degrees. Next thing I know, I'm on my hands and knees on the hardwood floor, which wouldn't have been bad, except for some reason I can't name. I fell forward and bashed my head. The next thing I remember, I'm in my bed, and my husband is yelling at me, stop repeating yourself, and he's really scared. And I realized I've been sitting in bed repeating myself. I also realized that I got up from bashing my head, walked into the bathroom on the hard concrete tile floor, and did not fall, used the toilet, got into bed, and then started repeating myself to my husband. And I realized something was wrong. And so I looked at my calendar to try to think about who were my patients the next day. I was trying to do a memory exercise, name your patients. And I opened my calendar, read the names, and recognized none of them. And meanwhile, my husband yelled at me. And then I realized I understood what he was saying and everything was good. And I said, I'm really, really sorry. And he said, what did you do? And I said, I fell out of bed, which was not true. And then I remembered, and I said, I didn't fall out of bed. I said, I was just changing the thermostat and the house tilted. And he looked at me strangely and he said, I think you have a concussion. And then again, I remember it was June or July. We were scared to go to the hospital. We would have had to get my son. We didn't know what would happen at the hospital. I said, oh, okay, look, in the bad old days, they didn't send you to the hospital for a concussion. They just woke you up every few hours. So wake me up every few hours. And we were fine. And the next day I was fine. But the point here is I don't know what happened to me last year. I really don't. And I don't know if I have had COVID, but I had lightheadedness, and that continued. Of course, I'd had a concussion at that point, and I pretty clearly had a concussion. I wasn't seeing double, thank goodness, but apparently I was kind of out of my right wits for about 10 minutes. And so after that, I was recovering from the concussion. So I don't know. I was lightheaded for months. I was really exhausted. I would finish my work every day, and this was starting in December of 2019, and all I could do was get in bed and knit. I couldn't do anything else, and I made the best of it. I just thought, well, I'm getting older, blah, blah, blah. Okay, flash forward to September. I sort of remember my birthday, but I honestly don't remember the summer. I have flashes like photographs in my head, but I really don't remember it. When I look back, this horrifies me, I can tell you. I read my notes, my chart notes for my patients. They make perfect sense. None of my patients figured it out. My patients stayed with me. Everything went well. So apparently minute to minute I was okay, but my long-term memory tanked. Could be the concussion, who knows? Could have been COVID, who knows? But it's been a pretty rip snorter of a year. And I was worried and still worry that I'm a long hauler with COVID. Nobody has noticed this. I went back to see my doctor. She wasn't even interested. She was focused on the diabetes. I have a new doctor. My previous doctor quit, which is good. I won't miss Dr. Stupid. And I learned some horrifying things when she quit, that the policy of that medical group is to do certain things I don't agree with the patients. And so Dr. Stupid may not have been as stupid as I thought. But anyway, I have a new doctor, and she's all excited. She acts like a beauty contestant, like, you picked me, seriously, when I was talking to her. So I'm trying to work through all the annual stuff, getting the pap smear, getting a mammogram. I need to go to a dentist. We have all these things now that I've got 2 shots behind me that I can do. However, the first thing I did was repaired the windshield on my car, got an oil change at the dealership, bought 2 more because they have a bargain price if we buy 3. And got my windshield wipers replaced. So $2,000 later, I'm paying my way out of that debt because I didn't want to touch the savings. I really want to keep a cash reserve. So what I'm telling you is it's been a rip snorter of a year. And I think the last thing I remember clearly from 2020, oh boy, was probably about Friday the 13th of March. Is about the last thing that's really clear. I can remember seeing patients. So now a lot of my patients are leaving. They've met their clinical goals. And it's really strange because I feel like I've barely met them, but they seem to know me. So this is wonderful. So that's my story. Now, meanwhile, my birthday, my 60th birthday, comes by in early September. You want to talk about a 60 crisis. I'm recovering from a concussion. I have no long-term memory, and I just had no energy. I thought, I'm a goner. My father died at 61 of a brain tumor. I'm a goner. So one of the important things to me has been suddenly I have energy again. And suddenly with the warm weather, I started toying with the idea of running. So the fact that I've been running, that I've run 4 times in the last 7 days and done a 10-mile bike ride, I feel like a new human being. I cannot tell you how important it has been to me to do these things. So, 2020, the year I was truly the dizzy blonde. Let's see what else is going on. Well, I think that's about it. I do have a last word for Minerva, where she's lying on my bed. It was so cute this morning. She jumped up on the bed, jumped into my arms, and pressed her head against me. She doesn't usually do this, and was purring wildly. I don't know. She must have had nightmares or something. So anyway, she laid down next to me with her head over the edge of the bed, and as she does to prove ownership, she stretched out one forepaw and dangled it. This is the Minerva hand gesture for, I own this place now. So there she is, doing her hand gesture. That always cracks me up. And I guess it's good to let Minerva have the last word. But things are good. I'm feeling great. I'm heading for vacation, 5 more days. And I'm really looking forward to it. And it's a better world. The True Love gets his second shot on April 23rd. My son we're going to sign him up the second they open it to teenagers. We're very excited about this because the research seems to be the Pfizer one works for kids who are, sort of early teens and may only need 1 shot. And that would be divine to have both boys get their shots and to feel like we're okay. In the meantime, we did go out to eat tonight. We went to a favorite sushi place, ate indoors. Everything went well. There's nobody anywhere near us. Everybody was spit shielded and face masked in the staff. It was done really nicely. We had a lovely time. But I've had my shower now. And I'm happy to be sitting here in my t-shirt and sarong, which is what I wear around the house instead of a robe in the summer. And everything is good. So thank you for hanging out with me. Please remember the crisis is not over. You really still have to get your vaccine. You really still have to wear your mask even if you have 2 shots. Please wash your hands. Please socially distance. I did that experiment for you when I had COVID. None of my patients got sick. I'm very pleased about that. So please socially distance, but most of all, please stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.